March 15th, 2011, 3:17 a.m. The Oval Office, White House, Washington, D.C. President Barack Obama sat alone in the dim light of the Oval Office, staring at the phone in his hand. Outside, protesters had been gathering for weeks. The economy was still struggling. Wars continued in Iraq and Afghanistan. The hope and change he had promised seemed further away than ever, and for the first time since taking office, Obama felt something he had never expected to feel as president: complete despair. The weight of leading the free world had become unbearable, and Obama found himself thinking about a conversation he'd had years earlier with the advisor who had mentioned that Bob Dylan, the poet of American resistance and change, had once said something profound about leadership during dark times. Obama had Dylan's private number, a contact established through mutual friends in Chicago's music scene. But he had never used it until tonight. What happened in their 2-hour conversation would not only save Obama's presidency, but redefine his entire approach to leadership and give him the perspective he needed to guide America through its darkest challenges. Obama had been awake since 2 a.m., reading briefings that painted an increasingly grim picture of America's situation. Unemployment was still above 9%. Congress was deadlocked on every major issue. His approval ratings were plummeting. The Tea Party movement was gaining momentum, and even his own party was beginning to question his leadership. But what had driven him to pick up the phone wasn't political pressure. It was something deeper. Obama had reached that point that every leader eventually faces: the moment when you realize that the problems you're trying to solve might be bigger than your ability to solve them. The phone rang 3 times before a familiar nasal voice answered. "Yeah? Mr. Dillon? This is Barack Obama. I'm sorry to call so late, but I need to talk to someone who understands what it means to speak for people who might not want to hear what you have to say." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Mr. President, can't say I was expecting this call. You okay?" Obama let out a laugh that contained no humor. "Honestly? No, I'm not okay. I'm sitting in the Oval Office at 3 in the morning wondering if I've failed the American people. Wondering if all the hope I promised was just naive optimism from someone who didn't understand how broken things really are. And you called me because? Because you've been writing about broken systems and impossible dreams longer than anyone. Because you've spent 50 years finding ways to keep believing when belief seems impossible. And right now, I'm losing my ability to believe in anything." Dylan was quiet for a moment, and Obama could hear him moving around, perhaps making coffee. "Mr. President, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "When you decided to run for president, what did you think the job actually was?" Obama thought about it. "I thought it was about leading people toward a better future, about inspiring them to believe in change, to work together, to overcome the divisions that keep us from solving our problems." "And what do you think it is now?" "Now? I think it's about managing decline, about disappointing people more slowly, about choosing which promises to break and which hopes to crush." Obama's voice was heavy with exhaustion and disillusionment. "That's your problem right there." "What do you mean?" Dylan's voice became more serious, more focused. "You're confusing your job with the outcome. A leader's job isn't to guarantee success. It's to keep people pointed toward what's possible even when what's possible seems impossible." Obama was listening intently now. "Go on." "I've been writing songs for 50 years about dreams that seemed impossible. Civil rights, ending war, justice for working people. Most of the time, the dreams seemed further away after I wrote the songs than before. But that wasn't the point." "What was the point?" The point was to keep the dreams alive, to remind people that just because something hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it can never happen. Obama felt something shift inside him. Not optimism exactly, but a different way of thinking about his role. But Bob, what if the systems are too broken? What if the problems are too big? What if I'm just one person trying to move mountains that can't be moved? Dylan laughed, but it wasn't dismissive. Mr. President, let me tell you something about mountains. You don't move them by pushing on them. You move them by showing people there's something worth climbing for on the other side. I'm not sure I follow. Your job isn't to fix everything that's broken. Your job is to help people remember what's possible when they work together. Your job is to be the voice that says, "This is hard, but we can do hard things." For the next hour, Dylan shared insights about leadership that Obama had never heard from any political advisor or historical text. The thing about hope, Dylan said, is that it's not a feeling. Hope is a decision. You decide to keep moving forward even when you can't see the end of the road. But how do you make that decision when everything you try seems to fail? You change what success means. Success isn't getting everything you want when you want it. Success is keeping the possibility of progress alive for the next person, the next generation. Dylan told Obama about the civil rights movement, about how the songs he wrote in the 1960s weren't actually about changing laws. They were about changing hearts. About how the real victories often happened decades after the songs were written, in ways the songwriters never could have predicted. When I wrote those songs, Dylan said, I didn't think they were going to end racism or stop war. I thought they were going to remind people that racism and war weren't permanent fixtures of human existence. And you think that made a difference? Mr. President, you're sitting in the Oval Office as the first black president in American history. Those songs didn't elect you, but they helped create a country where someone like you could be elected. That's how change actually works. Slowly, imperfectly, but inevitably. Obama found himself taking notes as Dylan continued. Here's what I've learned about leadership. The leader's job isn't to have all the answers. The leader's job is to ask the right questions and trust that other people will help find the answers. What are the right questions? Questions like, what kind of country do we want to be? What kind of future do we want to leave our children? How do we treat the most vulnerable people in our society? Those questions don't have easy answers, but they point people in the right direction. Around 4:30 a.m., Obama asked Dylan the question that had been weighing on him most heavily. Bob, what if I'm just not good enough for this job? What if the problems require someone with more experience, more political skill, more ability to bring people together? Dylan's answer was immediate and certain. Mr. President, the country didn't elect you because they thought you could solve every problem. They elected you because they trusted you to care about the right things and to keep trying even when trying is hard. But what if I disappoint them? You will disappoint them. Every leader disappoints people. That's not the question. The question is, will you disappoint them because you stopped trying? Or will you disappoint them because the problems are bigger than any one person can solve? Obama felt something he hadn't felt in months. Clarity. What do you think I should focus on? Stop trying to be the president everyone wants you to be. Start being the president you actually are. Stop trying to make everyone happy. Start trying to move the country 1 inch closer to justice. Dylan paused, then added, and remember something important. You're not just the president for the people who voted for you. You're the president for the people who hate you too. Your job is to represent the best possibilities of all of them. As their conversation neared its end, Dylan offered Obama one final piece of advice that would guide him through the rest of his presidency. Mr. President, leadership isn't about being popular. Leadership is about being useful. Find ways to be useful to the future, even if the present doesn't appreciate it. When Obama finally hung up the phone at 5:23 a.m., he felt fundamentally different than he had when he made the call. Not optimistic exactly, but grounded. Not certain of success, but clear about purpose. The impact of that conversation was immediate and lasting. Within days, Obama's approach to public communication changed. He stopped trying to convince everyone that his policies would work quickly and perfectly. Instead, he started talking about the long-term work of building a better country, about the patience required for real change, about the importance of continuing to try even when progress feels impossible. His speeches became less about promising specific outcomes and more about calling people to participate in the ongoing work of democracy. Change doesn't happen overnight became a frequent refrain in Obama's public remarks. But change does happen if we keep working for it. Staff members noticed the change in Obama's approach to decision-making as well. He became less focused on short-term political calculations and more focused on what he called legacy questions, decisions based on how they would look in 10 or 20 years, rather than how they would poll in 10 or 20 days. The conversation with Dylan also influenced Obama's approach to his critics. Instead of seeing opposition as a barrier to overcome, he began seeing it as a natural part of the democratic process, something to work with rather than against. In 2012, when Obama was running for re-election, he called Dylan again. "Bob, I wanted to thank you. That conversation last year changed how I think about this job." "How so?" "I stopped trying to be the president who fixes everything, and I started trying to be the president who moves things in the right direction. It's made all the difference." Dylan's response was characteristically cryptic. Moving things in the right direction is the only job any of us really have. Obama won re-election in 2012, and many political observers noted a new maturity in his leadership style. Less soaring rhetoric, more practical wisdom. Less focus on transformational change, more focus on incremental progress. In his second term, Obama accomplished many of the goals that had seemed impossible during his first term. Healthcare reform implementation, marriage equality, climate action, criminal justice reform. Not through dramatic gestures, but through patient, persistent work. "The president learned something important," said one longtime Obama advisor. "He learned that leadership isn't about being a savior. It's about being a servant, serving the future, serving the next generation, serving possibilities that might not be realized until after you're gone." In 2016, as Obama was preparing to leave office, he made one final call to Dylan. "Bob, I wanted you to know, you saved my presidency. That conversation gave me the perspective I needed to actually do the job." "You saved your own presidency, Mr. President. You just needed someone to remind you what the job actually was, which is keeping hope alive. Not hope as wishful thinking, but hope as a commitment to keep working for what's possible." Dylan paused, then asked,